In this video, I will discuss total cost of ownership analysis. Total cost of ownership is a financial estimate that aims to reveal the complete cost associated with different processes such as acquiring, operating, maintaining a particular asset or system over its entire life cycle. So this is a keyword, which means we will consider all the cost in the entire life cycle of a product. This approach goes beyond the initial purchase price and includes all the relevant costs incurred throughout the life cycle of that product. Now here is an example. Here is a company. This company makes different types of vehicles, and for that it buys engines from supplier, and it wants to conduct an analysis which supplier would be most effective and most cost efficient. For example, here it says that they will be using a lot size of 1000, although we have this data. And as you can see in this data, it says their annual requirement is 12,000 units, and they will be buying from the supplier in lot sizes of 1000, which means they will be placing 12 orders. So most likely it is 1000 engines every month, and total will be 12,000. Some other important pieces of information are that the buyer will reimburse the supplier for tooling, and that it's a critical purchase, and if there is any late delivery, it will cost 50% lost sale and 50% back orders. The manager has obtained quotes from 2 reliable suppliers but need to know which supplier is most cost effective. The terms of sale are 210 net 30 for supplier 1. This means that the buyer has an agreement with the supplier that if the buyer pays within 10 days, they will be eligible for 2% discount. But in any case, the payment is due within 30 days. This is the term for supplier 1. For supplier 2, this is the term 110 net 30, which means if the buyer pays to supplier within 10 days, buyer would be eligible for a discount of 1%, but payment is due in 30 days. This is the data that we'll be using for total cost of ownership analysis. Annual demand is 12,000. Company will be buying in lot size of 1000. So every time they will place an order of 1000 unit, which means they will be placing 12 orders. So 12 orders multiplied by 1000 in every order, that will be 12,000 units. And the weight of each engine is 22 pounds. We need to convert it into tons at a later stage, so we'll divide by 2000. Order processing cost is $125. Inventory carrying cost is 20% of the value of inventory, and cost of working capital is 10%. So this is on annual basis. We need to calculate it for 30 days. Because this is on annual basis, we will divide by 365. Price of finished product is $4,500 and their profit margin is 18%, and back order cost is $15 per unit. Late delivery and lost sales are each 50%. Buyer will be placing an order of 1000 every time, and 1000 falls in this range. The schedule is that if buyer buys from 1 to 199 units per order, that will incur a cost of $510 per unit from supplier 1. However, if buyer increases the order size from 1000 to 2,999, that will incur a cost of $500 per unit. This is the one that's relevant to our case, because the buyer will be placing an order of 1000 units every time. This is the one that will be applicable, and buyer will be paying a price of $500 per unit. Another possibility which is not relevant, which means if buyer increases their order size and makes it 3000 or greater, then engine cost would further reduce to $490 per unit. But again, this is not relevant. Tooling cost is 22,000 for supplier 1 and 20,000 for supplier 2. Supplier 1 says if you make a payment within 10 days, they will be offered 2% discount, but in any case, payment is due within 30 days. Supplier 2 says 110 net 30, which means if buyer makes a payment within 10 days, they would be eligible for a discount of 1%, but in any case, payment is due within 30 days. Distance of supplier from the buyer, supplier 1 is 125 miles away, supplier 2 is 100 miles away. Then supplier quality rating, which means you can expect for supplier 1 2% of units will be defective, and for supplier 2 3% units will be defective. And then late delivery, from supplier 1 you can expect 1% of deliveries will be late, and for supplier 2 it will be 2%. We will be using this data in total cost of ownership analysis. The first type of cost is total engine cost. Here the unit cost is $500. The buyer is ordering in a lot size of 1000 per unit, so therefore the relevant cost is $500 per unit. So which means $500, and the total number of engines that will be required throughout the year is 12,000. So total cost will become 12,000 multiplied by $500 per unit, and that will become $6 million. The next category is cash discount, which is about making payment to supplier. When you are buying engines, you have to make a payment to the supplier, and for that we'll be discussing a number of options. One is N30, 110 and 210. So N30 is that whereby a buyer makes the payment on the 30th day after receiving. 110 is when a buyer makes a payment within 10 days and they'll be eligible for a discount of 1%. And 210 is the payment scheme whereby when a supplier makes a payment within 10 days, they will be eligible for a discount of 2%. As we have already seen here, that supplier 1 offers 2% discount and supplier 2 offers 1% discount. So which means that this one, it would be relevant to supplier 2, this one, and 210, it would be relevant to supplier 1. When we discuss payment to supplier, one important concept is cost of capital, which is 10% in this case. So the idea of cost of capital is that every company needs money to run their operations, day-to-day operations, and many times companies borrow money, or sometimes they use their debt or equities to finance their operation. So that's called as cost of capital. Now, for example, when we discuss this option whereby a company makes a payment on the 30th day, so we want to know how much they will be saving. We want to compare two scenarios. One scenario is that whereby a buyer makes an immediate payment when supplies are received. The other scenario is that whereby buyer makes a payment on the 30th day. When a buyer makes an immediate payment to the supplier, they are stripped of cash for the rest of the month, and companies need money to run their operation. So in this case, the buyer will borrow money. So that's the cost of capital. And how much money they will borrow? That will be cost is equal to engine cost, and we know engine cost was $6 million, and then that's 10%. That's the cost of working capital. And because this 10% is on annual basis, we divide by 365 and we want to calculate it for 30 days. So $6 million multiplied by 10% cost of working capital multiplied by 30 days and divided by 365, and that becomes 49,315. So which means if a buyer makes an immediate payment to the supplier, then they would need this much money for the rest of the month to run their operations. However, on the other hand, if the buyer holds on to that money for 30 days, then they won't need cash, then they won't need to borrow money. In that case, this cost becomes their saving. So if the company goes for this option, which means immediate payment, that will be the cost of capital. However, if the company goes for this option, which means paying on the 30th day, they will be saving on this one. So this cost will become saving. If the buyer makes the payment on the 30th day, then our calculation will become engine cost, that's $6 million multiplied by 10% cost of capital, which means 0.1 multiplied by 30 over 365. So that becomes 49,315. So that is the saving which the buyer will make if they make payment on the 30th day. And then the next thing will be 210, saving on the cost of capital, which means 6 million multiplied by 10%, which means 0.1 multiplied by, because over here the buyer is holding money for 10 days, so it will be 10 divided by 365. So that becomes one factor that represents the saving the buyer will be making by making payment on the 10th day. However, there is one additional thing, and the additional thing is that when they make this payment on the 10th day, they are eligible for 2% discount. So we will also add this 2% discount here. 6 million multiplied by 0.02, which represents 2%, and that becomes 136,438. This amount is a sum of two factors. First of all, it includes the saving on the cost of capital by holding money for 10 days. Second thing, it also includes a discount of 2% which was offered by the supplier. We need to choose one of these two options. So should the company make a payment on the 30th day or company make a payment on the 10th day? So because these are our saving, which one would you like? Would you like to receive 49,315 or 136,438? Of course, we would like to choose this one because this is greater saving. And for that purpose, I will use this formula. First of all, I will choose the bigger one, the bigger of this one or this one, whichever is the bigger, we choose that, and then we multiply that by -1. The reason I made it negative, which means this one, because in this table we have different types of categories. One is cost that is going out of our pocket, and this is cash discount which is coming into our pocket. We cannot mix oranges and apples. We need to make sure that when we are doing our calculation, they are subtracted. The next category is transportation cost, and for transportation cost we'll be using this data. First of all, we know that the total annual demand is 12,000, and every time you place an order, that will be order of 1,000. We also know that supplier 1 is located 125 miles away from the buyer, and then we also have these figures, that's truckload, which means transportation cost will depend upon how much is the weight of the shipment. So every time the company is placing an order of 1,000 and the weight of engine is 22 pound, which means 1,000 multiplied by 22 is equal to 22,000. This applies when the weight is more than 40,000, but in our case it is 22,000, so which means $1.2 per ton miles. So our transportation cost will become order size, and they are ordering 1,000 engines. The weight of one engine is 22 pounds, so this becomes the weight of the shipment in pounds. So the weight of one shipment is 22,000 pounds. Next, we know that the supplier 1 is 125 miles away. We multiply that, and that becomes pounds miles, and then we know that the transportation cost will be 1.2, and we also need to convert it into tons. So I will divide by 2000. So that will be the cost for one type shipment, and because there will be 12 orders throughout the year, so I multiply by 12, and that becomes 19,800. The next category is ordering cost. Company will be placing a total of 12 orders. So the total annual demand is 12,000, and every time an order of 1,000 is placed, so it means they will place a total of 12 orders. 12 orders, and every time they place an order, it incurs $125. Ordering cost becomes $1,500. Now the next thing is carrying cost or cost of holding inventory, and the formula for that is Q over 2, and Q, which means order size. We know order size is 1,000 divided by 2. We divide by 2 because that becomes average inventory, and multiplied by annual holding rate. And as you can see here, that inventory carrying cost is 20%. So that's 20%. We'll be using that. 20% or 0.2 multiplied by the value of inventory, that's 500, and that becomes 50,000. The next category is quality cost or cost of defective items. That will be 6 million multiplied by 2%. So the cost of defective items will be $120,000. The next category is delivery rating, which is 1%, and this 1% will apply to both of these categories, which mean back orders and lost sales. So for back orders, the idea is that 1% deliveries will be late, and for those late deliveries 50% will contribute to back orders, and every time there's a back order there's a cost incurred, and that cost is $15. As you can see here, that the cost of back orders is $15 per unit. So our calculation will become number of engines, that's 12,000 multiplied by 1% that are late, multiplied by 50% or 0.5 and multiplied by $15, which is the cost that's incurred every time there's a back order, and that becomes 900. And the last category is lost sales because of late deliveries. So that will become 12,000, that's the total number of engines, multiplied by 1%, that's the late deliveries, multiplied by 50% lost sale, which means 0.5, multiplied by the price of one finished unit, and the price of one finished unit is 4,500, and their profit margin is 18%, so 0.18, and that becomes 48,600. There is one more cost, that's tooling cost, and tooling cost for supplier 1 is $22,000, so we will also add it here, 22,000. And if we add it, then our total cost becomes this much. So that's the total cost of ownership, which means if you do business with supplier 1, that will be the total cost incurred. Now we will do the same thing to supplier 2, and for supplier 2 everything will remain same. For example, in this case the price was $500, but in case of supplier 1 the price will be $498. So we'll be using $498, and the next thing will be calculating this for N30, and then we'll be calculating for 110, not 210, because in case of supplier 2 it's 110 that applies. So as you can see here, the terms are 110 at 30. So we will go first with N30, which means if the buyer makes a payment on the 30th day, how much will be savings. So that is this amount, that's the cost of engines multiplied by 10% working capital, which is 0.1, and multiplied by 30 over 365, because we know this cost of working capital is on annual basis, so we need to convert it into daily basis, and we need to convert it for 30 days, and that will become 49,117. The next one is to calculate 110, which means if the supplier makes a payment on the 10th day, then how much saving they will be making, and that will be cost of engines for supplier 2 multiplied by 10%, that's cost of working capital 0.1, multiplied by, because they are holding money for 10 days, so it will be 10 divided by 365. 365 is the number of the days, so that will become saving they will be making for 10 days. We need to add here one more thing, that's a discount. That's 1% discount. This cost multiplied by 1% or 0.01, and that becomes 76,132.6. We need to choose which one. So would you like to receive 49,117 or 76,132.6? Of course, you would like to receive the greater quantity, so we will choose this one. And because it's a cash discount, which means it is coming into your pocket, we differentiate it by multiplying by negatives, which means that it will be subtracted from the other one, because other are cost, this one is discount. So we choose this one, and that becomes 76,132.6, and all other things they remain same, and as a result of that the total cost of ownership for supplier 2 becomes this quantity. Now the last step is to make a comparison of total cost of ownership associated with supplier 1 and total cost of ownership associated with supplier 2. Whichever cost is smaller, we will go for that option. So obviously this one, that's $6.126361 million, that is the lower cost compared to this one. The buyer should choose supplier 1.